Well, the community exchange system, there are many different ways you could explain it. Essentially, it's an exchange system, as is money. It's a kind of money is a type of exchange system. There have been many different exchange systems throughout history. They talk about the gifting mode of exchange, and that's a kind of different kind of exchange system. And the money system that we have today is a particular kind of exchange system. The community exchange system doesn't mean we exchange in communities. It means that it's local in a community. The global money system, although we talk about national money systems, they're all part of a giant, big global money system. So its units are sort of national money systems, and the bigger picture is the global money system, which is essentially dollar-based. And we believe that money should be devolved down to the community level. So in other words, people living in smaller units should have control over money, whereas at the moment money is created and controlled at the sort of national and global level, and that's why the communities tend to get left out of it. Now, the community exchange system, I suppose you could say it's a kind of a money system, although we don't like to think of it as money. I prefer to use the term exchange systems. So money is a particular type of exchange system. And as I say, there are many other kinds of exchange systems or modes of exchange. And in the community exchange system, we don't use physical money as such to exchange things. So we're exchanging goods and services and information and all kinds of things, all the same sort of stuff that's available in the regular economy. And people can exchange that without using money. Most of us think, well, how's that possible? That's all we know. We grow up with the idea that if you want to get things or you want to sell things, you have to use money. And the history of humanity shows that that's not true, because people have been exchanging things since the beginning of time, and since the first humans appeared on Earth hundreds of thousands of years ago, they've been exchanging things. So money itself, money as we know it today, is quite a modern thing. It might be a couple of thousand years old, but in the full time span of the human race, it's only a very modern thing. And so we believe that you don't really need something in between in order to exchange something. Money, if you look at its history, it started off being like a commodity. All money systems are really kind of efforts to get over the inconvenience of bartering things, because bartering is very inconvenient, because we both got to have something that the other wants, and that's almost impossible. So often, even the earliest kind of bartering or exchanging, people would find some third object that even if you didn't really want it, you'd accept it in exchange for what the other person has, simply because you knew with that third object you could get rid of it some other way. And then within time, people found that precious metals were useful because everyone would accept them, even though they're not really useful in themselves. You knew that if you accepted it in exchange for what you're giving, you could then use that precious metal to give to someone else. And that evolved into coins, and later into other kinds of commodities, and then into token money, which was tokens representing the coins, and then into the modern money system that we know today. So all exchanges under money systems involve some kind of medium. In other words, we don't just swap things backwards and forwards. We exchange them first for money. So money is the exchange medium. And for thousands of years, that was really the only way we could do it, because if you're trading with someone across the seas, you can't have a kind of information exchange system, because there were no methods of exchange. There was no internet, and people didn't even write, they hadn't even learnt the skill of writing and keeping records and all that kind of stuff. So there was no other way to exchange things with people that you didn't know except through some kind of common object that they would accept. So for thousands of years that was possible, and then out of that grew the kind of money system that we have today, where in fact nothing is really exchanged. It's all just numbers on computers. So essentially we looked at this idea and we thought, well, do you really need, in the day of computers and internet and global networks, do you really need an exchange medium? Because in fact there isn't really one. It's all just numbers on computers just changing in bank accounts. So we said get rid of that idea that you actually need an exchange medium, and let's just simply exchange things and keep a record of it. So you could say the community exchange system is really an information-based exchange system, where as the money system as we know it is a kind of commodity-based or an object-based exchange system, or we can just call it a money-based exchange system, which means that all exchanges are mediated with some object, an exchange medium that we call money. And when you have money, or anything that you're going to call money or represents money, even if it's numbers and computers, someone has to create that money. So in other words, no trading can take place until there is a supply of that money. I suppose it's a bit like saying you have a soccer match and you can't play that game until you have a supply of goals. Whereas in fact, you don't really need a supply of goals. You simply play that game, and if you score a goal, you kick the ball through the net, you get 1 point for it. And the other side, in effect, is getting minus 1 point. And if they score, then they get 1 point, and the other side get minus 1 point, so you're back to 0. So you didn't need a supply of goals to play that game. And so what the money system that we know is like a kind of a game. It's a game of giving and taking, or putting and getting. And the idea of it is that in order to do that, play that game, you need a supply of these goals. And someone outside of this circle between the traders actually has to create that money, put it into the circuit, and lend it to you to use. And you've got to pay them for giving you that money. So they're actually extracting something out of this circle of us trading. They're taking something out of it simply for giving this money. And today, that money doesn't exist. They don't even have to dig holes in the ground to pull out gold or anything. It's all just numbers and computers. So we go to the bank, we want to buy a house, the bank says, right, here's some numbers in your account. You just type them in 5 seconds, and for the next 20 years you're paying that other person for that house 3 times over, but meanwhile the bank is sucking that money out, and you're paying for their house as well as your own house. In fact, you're paying for 2 houses for them and 1 for yourself. So you don't really need that, because it's just numbers on a computer. So we said, get rid of that, and let's just trade directly between each other. We create our own numbers, so I get the house from you. You get 1 million points, I get a minus 1 million points. Now I've got to pay off, in a sense, that minus 1 million points. The credit really came from the community. The bank didn't provide any credit. The credit came from the community in the sense that they provided all the work that went into that house. So we're actually borrowing from the community. Now we've got to give back to the community over the next 20 years or so the value of that house. So we bought that house for equivalent of, say, 1 million rand, and over so many years, whatever is agreed upon, we give back to the community wealth. We input wealth into the community, and that house is then paid for. So we didn't need the bank, and we achieved exactly the same object. And we didn't have to pay some parasites outside of the circle some amount. We didn't need to work for them as well as for the community. So in other words, we don't really need that sort of banking thing. We don't need the whole money system, because we've got networks and we've got computers. So we couldn't have done that even 50 years ago, even 20 years ago we couldn't have done that. It's only really since the internet and everybody has access to the computers, and we can actually communicate with each other. And really that's what the community exchange system does. It's just a system that allows us to keep a record of what we receive, and the numbers that we enter into the computer are really just the values of the objects exchanged. So it's really just numbers. So it's not a quantity of anything. If I say I've got 500,000 talents, which is the name of our currency here in the Cape Town chapter of the community exchange system that we call the Cape Town Talent Exchange, those numbers don't represent a quantity of anything. It's just a measure. It's like saying it's from Cape Town to Johannesburg is 1,500 kilometers. And what we're saying is the flow of value from the community to me is the equivalent of, or rather from me to the community is, 5,000, whatever that number is. So it's representing, it's like a measure, like kilograms or, kilometers or something. So you can never really be short of these things. It's like saying Cape Town to Johannesburg is 1,500 kilometers, but, I've only got 1,000, therefore I can't go to Johannesburg. It's crazy, it doesn't make sense. So it's the same here. If we want to exchange something, I can't say, I've only got 1,000, but it's 1,500. We can just trade. It's just numbers on a computer. There's no shortage of them. There's no supply of them. They just represent that value that's flowing between us. And that's what we're putting on the system.